All right, how we doing today? It is the 5 o'clock edition of what I will call the post-mortem on the Steelers losing to Cleveland in Cleveland on Thursday night. I am Paul Zeise, of course. It is the Paul Zeise live show, and so we are here every night. We are here, of course. Tonight it's cold. It's very cold. And it's rainy, and it's a dreary night. And quite frankly, it was a dreary night the other night when the Steelers played the Browns. And, there's a lot of discussion about the Steelers and the Browns and everything else about the Browns game that is really going to be dissected for the next week and a half. But the reality of the situation is, I'm willing to chalk it up as a bad night at the office for the Steelers. There are some people that say there might be some deeper concerns about the Steelers. There might be some discussion about how, they are not necessarily a good enough team. Maybe what we saw early in the season was fool's gold, but I'm not really willing to go there yet, because I think what we saw on Thursday night against the Steelers, against the Browns from the Steelers, was basically this. They didn't play very well. As poorly as I thought they played at times, I thought their coaching was worse. In fact, this is one of the few times I'll agree with people who want to put every single loss on the coach. I didn't think the coaching really was as good as it needed to be. I thought there were a number of decisions, starting with the first major decision of the game. If you think about it, the first major decision of the game, they had a 58-yard field goal attempt in a monsoon, and at that point, the wind was bad. The wind was howling, and it wasn't really good conditions to ask your kicker to go out there and kick the longest, basically, I think the second longest field goal of his career. It was a start of what I thought was a number of bad decisions that really put the Steelers in a bad place, because if they punt it there, they flip the field in their favor, as opposed to handing the ball essentially at the 48-yard line to the Browns. And then, even if you get the stop, the Browns punt it. Now you got to go the full length of the field. The second series, you get the ball, you go for it again, and you give the Browns good field position again, because you don't make it. I honestly think that's really kind of the problem I had last night with the Steelers. Is I thought early in the game they didn't do what they usually do, which is sort of play the field position game and be okay with punting the ball and letting your defense pin them back. And then if they get a 3 and out, you're getting the ball back with reasonably good field position. And so, I thought there were a number of coaching decisions, blowing timeouts in the last drive, but blowing a timeout early in the third quarter. There's a number of different things you can point to that you would say, you know what, they didn't do really what they needed to do from the coaching side, from sideline, to give their team every chance to win. So again, I'm not going to sit here and bash Mike Tomlin, because obviously they're 8-3. They've had a pretty good season so far. They're probably exceeding what some people thought that they would be able to do. But he didn't have a good night on Thursday night. And I don't call it the Tomlin game or whatever people call it. On some level, you've got to give a little bit of credit to the Browns. I mean, let's start with the fact that Jameis Winston, played pretty well. And as I said all week, Jameis Winston is the wild card in this game. He's the wild card for the Browns. And the reason he's a wild card for the Browns is because he can play really, really well, or he can play where he's a disaster. And I knew he would throw some balls up for grabs, because he always does. And the Steelers came down with one. And, of course, he also had a fumble. Of course, that fumble, I don't know if I blame Jameis Winston for that. He got hit from the blind side by Herbig. And that was a tough play to hold on to the ball. But all told, this was a game where the Steelers just did not play well. And, they had won 5 in a row. In some ways, throughout that 5-game winning streak, they've been a little bit fortunate on a couple of things that have happened in their favor. On Thursday night, you know what? The ball kind of bounced the other way. I don't want to hear about referees. I don't want to hear about this stuff. I don't want to hear about, they got away with holding calls. You know what? I always say this. If you're going to put photos on the internet or videos on the internet to show that the Browns got away with a hold on this play, unless you're going to put the same videos up there showing places where the Steelers got away with it or the Steelers didn't get a penalty, unless you're going to do that, I got to be honest with you, I'm not interested in looking at, your video cut up of, well, the Browns got away with this and they shouldn't have. The Steelers just didn't play very well. And at this point in the season, you know what? There's going to be a few games like this. Now, the elephant in the room, the one thing that everyone is kind of talking about is this whole thing with Justin Fields. First of all, let's stop with the nonsense that they would have won had they played Justin Fields the entire game. Because I saw at least 5, maybe 6 throws that Russell Wilson made that Justin Fields does not make, including the touchdown, including the first touchdown he threw. Or actually, it would have been the second touchdown that they scored. And I think it was to Calvin Austin down the middle. That's a throw that Justin Fields doesn't make. He doesn't make that throw, 10 out of 100 times. He just doesn't. And I think that really Russell Wilson was pretty good for the most part for most of the game. I don't think he really did anything wrong. And I thought the thing that they did with Justin Fields that really is a little concerning, they started to try and get a little too cute with it. They started to use Justin Fields and try and get a little too cute with it. And I think they outthought themselves. I really did. The one play where it was a third and, it was manageable, maybe 4, 3rd and 3, they bring in Justin Fields and then they have him throw that jump ball down the sidelines to George Pickens, and people are complaining because there wasn't a pass interference call. I mean, in that game last night, I'm sorry. If you're looking for pass interference calls and things, it's not probably going to happen. And it's not probably going to happen because I actually don't think the referees could see, just like anyone else. But the reality is it wasn't a good throw. And 3rd and 4, you bring Justin Fields in. If you actually just go with Russell Wilson and throw a 5-yard pass somewhere and it's a first down, you can kill another 2 minutes of the clock. I mean, that was a crucial 3rd down. And they used Justin Fields, and then they decided they were going to try and get cute and throw it down the field. You can't do that. It's basically one of these things where you outthink yourself all the time. You outthink yourself. And when you outthink yourself, you really take away the effectiveness of a situation like Justin Fields from the standpoint of it's always important to note that, you know what he does well is run the ball. And what he does well is, if you want to do like a couple of RPOs, you want to do a couple of other plays where you take advantage of his ability to run the football, that's okay. I think it's important to note that. I thought they basically used Justin Fields probably stupidly on Thursday night. I feel like they also hurt the rhythm of their offense a little bit by using Justin Fields. Because to me, when you look at what they did, it didn't make a lot of sense. I know he had the 35-yard run, but their best chance of winning is with Russell Wilson playing quarterback. They have a passing game that is comparable to a lot of the other teams out there because of Russell Wilson, and they can move the ball in multiple ways. One of the things I thought last night, and this continues to be a problem, is I thought both of their tackles did not have a very good night. They did a better job on Myles Garrett late in the game. In the second half, he really did nothing. For all of the, beating his chest and, telling everyone to listen, he's the best out there because he had 3 sacks. Honestly, it's incredible to me if you really think about it. He did nothing in the second half. But if you watched how they took care of him, they had a tight end. They had, Darnell Washington, or they had Pat Freiermuth, or they even had Jalen Warren at times, chipping him and picking him up. He was almost a non-factor in the second half. And quite frankly, the Browns were able to do that to T.J. Watt the entire game. They did a really, really good job of identifying where T.J. Watt was and giving him 2, 3, 4, sometimes blockers. And so, I feel like the 2 tackles that they have, when they face these big-name guys, they've got to be better than they are. It can't always be we help them out. It can't always be we have to give them a tackle or a tight end. It can't always be that. It has to be we help them out in ways that, we can still get enough guys out in the routes that we can throw the ball down the field. I thought, again, conditions were bad. And, when conditions are bad like that, I usually take the results of the game with a grain of salt because there was so many different things that made it really difficult to do the things you usually do well. Throw the ball, there was a couple of times where you saw guys trying to make the cut or their move and they slid. Handling the ball. There's a lot of things that really, if you look at it, it's just going to be an interesting game no matter what. And in this particular game, they got the other thing about the Steelers that has been really good this year. The other thing has been special teams. And yet last night their special teams let them down a little bit. Particularly at the most important time of the game, they shank a punt. And then they give the ball to the Browns on about the 45-yard line or something like that, 48, 47, something like that. Then they have the Browns in 3rd and 2, and there was that weird play with Jameis Winston where he drops back the pass, and just as he's about to throw it, he gets crushed. The ball comes out of his hand, obviously, slides out of his hand. It hit the Browns defender or a Browns offensive lineman. Now, at this point, if you're Mike Tomlin, you have 2 choices. And your 2 choices are this. Take the penalty and make them decline the penalty and make them convert on 4th and 2. Or take the penalty and give them a 3rd and 7. At first, he was going to put them on at 4th and 2 because I think Mike Tomlin, what he was really thinking was, listen, if it's 4th and 2, okay, if it's 4th and 2 on it would have been like a 42-yard field goal. Maybe they'll attempt the field goal. But then when it was pretty clear that the Browns were probably going to go for it, then all of a sudden they accepted the penalty. And I think the other part of it is they didn't understand that the penalty didn't involve loss of down. Because that's the thing, a grounding penalty would have been loss of down. It would have been 4th and whatever, wherever they decided that, he was. So it would have been like 4th and 10 or something, or 4th and 12. But the bottom line is it wasn't loss of down. And here's the thing, if you listen to whoever the rules expert is that they have, the referee that they have on the broadcast, it's pretty clear to me they made the right call. I know there are some people that are angry. And they're saying that call should have been grounding. Actually, by the way the rule is written, it wasn't grounding. Because if you watch Jameis Winston, he goes back, and just as he's about to throw the ball, he gets basically depleted. He gets knocked into next week. So he's kind of just sort of trying to throw the ball, and it slid out of his hands and went straight forward. That's generally not going to be grounding. because he didn't just throw it, or throw it away or throw it at someone's feet. He basically did try, and he was like, it looked like he was actually going to step into a throw and throw it down the field. Either way, Mike Tomlin opts for it to be 3rd and 7. They convert about an 18, 19-yard pass, and the rest is history. The other thing is, right down when they got down inside like the 10-yard line or whatever it was, there was a theory that on the second play, they basically let Nick Chubb score so they could get the ball back. Which brings into question, if that's the case, why didn't you just let him score the first time? And so you had about another 45 seconds to operate with. So I'm not sure that I buy completely the theory that they let him score. Because if they did, I'm wondering why they didn't let him score on the first run. Because then at that point, you would have gotten the ball back with like a minute 40, a minute 50, and you would have had, at one time you would have had enough time to go do what you needed to do. So to me, I thought that was one of the coaching decisions, that if they did indeed let him score, it's not going to be, then they wasted a play, because they should have let him play. They should have let him score on the play before that. That's just the way I look at it. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of different ways that you can, look at that play and sequence. Mine would have been, let's try and stop them and force them to kick a field goal in these conditions, even though it was a chip shot. Force them to kick a field goal, and that's the way it is. To me, it's a bad way to end the game. I'll tell you another play that really didn't sit well with me, and I don't know about you. If you're going to run a fade, which is what they ran, a fade, a little fade to the left there on the 2-point conversion, when you're trying to take a 3-point lead. If you're going to run that fade like that, why are you running it to Cordarrelle Patterson, who's probably option, 7, 6? If I'm going to throw a fade into the end zone, let's count the guys that I'd rather do it to. Obviously, Pickens is first, right? I would say probably Freiermuth is second. Washington is third. I would say Van Jefferson is fourth. Mike Williams is fifth. And if you're going to ask me to choose between Patterson and Najee Harris, say I'm probably throwing it to Najee Harris. And also Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin as well, even though he's, the bottom line is it was the worst play call of the night at a time when they finally took a lead and they were trying to go up by 3. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And again, that all goes back to what I would tell you is the lack of, I don't know if it's preparedness or game plan or just execution by the coaching staff, because that just seems to be a theme from last night. The good news is it's only one loss, and it doesn't kill you. It does take you from being in control of your own destiny to try and win that number 1 seed to now you're going to need help again. Someone beating Kansas City or Buffalo or whatever. I mean, I have to look at the tiebreakers now. But the reality is that's the only thing that happened. And quite frankly, you probably were not going to get the number 1 seed anyway. You probably weren't. And so I feel like if you look at it from that standpoint, okay, it's a loss that really doesn't hurt you all that much. You still play the Ravens again, and you beat them 7 out of 8 or whatever it is. So if you beat them, you're going to win the AFC North. The Ravens, you still have a game in hand, by the way, on the Ravens, as they have 4 losses and you only have 3. Go on, beat Cincinnati next week, and nobody's going to be worrying about this loss to the Browns. It was a bad night for the Steelers, no question about it. They didn't play well. They didn't do a very good job of doing the things that have made them a good team. Special teams is, one of them. But, they still won the turnover battle, which is something they do very well. I'm just telling you, if you look at all of the different ways that this loss could hurt the Steelers, I don't know that it's that big of a deal. Now, that's offensively. defensively, what we've seen from this team is when they play one of these quarterbacks that's pretty good at throwing the football, they can get picked apart. They certainly can get picked apart. You know, if Watt and Herbig and Highsmith and all those guys up front don't get home, the Steelers are not great at covering guys. No, I don't know if that's scheme or if it's player-wise or whatever, but I would just tell you, they are probably not nearly good as good covering on the back end as they need to be. You know, I think Joey Porter Jr., let's talk about him. You know, he's obviously a good player. He's obviously a good player, okay? But he's got a long way to go. And I didn't think he had a good night last night. I also think that he's got to learn a little better technique because he just can't rely on trying to muscle guys and overpower them and be really physical all the time. It's not always going to work for him. It just isn't. And I think that's really what the biggest issue is with him that I have is that, you know, he's now going to really legitimately work on his coverage. And I think that's the key, you know, his coverage. In coverage, he's pretty good, but this idea that he's been this lockdown corner is silly because he hasn't. He hasn't locked anybody down. He's had a good run of, you know, being a good, reliable player. He's good in run support. You know, he makes some plays with his physicality, but he's got to get better. And the only way he's going to get better is just by continuing to improve and work on his technique every week. You know, Minkah Fitzpatrick, they're paying a lot of money to. I know Mike Tomlin at his press conference the other day said he thinks Minkah Fitzpatrick's had a great year. I don't know what we must be watching a different game because I think that Minkah Fitzpatrick is not doing enough to warrant his elite quote unquote status or whatever you want to say. He's just not. You know, so, you know, there were a couple of plays. I mean, a great example was the play where Jameis Winston hit a long pass down the middle. The guy caught it. I can't remember which receiver caught it. He caught it and didn't really tuck it away. And I think it was Elliott, you know, put his helmet into the ball and he got a fumble. That was going to be like a 30-yard completion. And there was nobody around the guy. And there was a couple of other plays. I mean, the play that Jameis Winston threw the interception to the left. If he just looks straight down the middle, there's a guy wide open 25 yards down the field. So, you know, the Steelers are good on defense. But if they're going to become elite, and, you know, elite means doesn't matter who you play, you shut them down. You can say, well, the Ravens and the Commanders, they both have really good offenses. One, the Commanders scored a lot of points, but two, and I think it's number one. I said if they play against these quarterbacks that are very good at throwing the football, that's why, you know, the Bengals might be a worse matchup for the Steelers than the Ravens because Joe Burrow is really good and those receivers are really good. And so, you know, I think that's going to be a big, important key for next week is they've got to tighten up their coverage on the back end. They do that, they have basically, you know, an opportunity then to, you know, get off the field when they need to get off the field. But if the Bengals can protect Joe Burrow a little bit, I honestly think that if you think about it, I honestly think that he's going to have a big day. Now, the Bengals defense stinks, so the Steelers might be able to score against them. But the reality is Joe Burrow, if he's protected and he gets enough time to throw and his receivers, they're going to be running free probably in the secondary. He'll have an opportunity, you know, to make some plays. It'll be interesting. Like I said, they play the Bengals twice. They've got to play Jameis Winston again one time. They got to play Patrick Mahomes once. And I think Jalen Hurts is not a terrible throw. You know, I think he's okay too. I think he throws it reasonably well. And they've got some good receivers. So honestly, you know, this is something the Steelers have to get better at. I think their secondary has been a little bit of their Achilles heel. And, you know, I know that they've added Cam Sutton into the mix, and now they've got a little bit of depth. I think Deshaun Elliott's been a nice player for them. Beanie Bishop's been an okay player for them. But as a unit, they haven't played great. They really haven't. At times, they've been actually more lucky than good. The Beanie Bishop, I think all of his interceptions basically were bounced off the chest of a receiver somewhere. That's the one thing I would say. If you take away anything from last night's game, that might be the thing you take away, because it's not the first time. Jane Daniels is a nice player. He's not really accurate yet. He's not a guy that's going to, that stands in there and throws the ball down the field and makes play after play, makes a lot of plays with his legs. He's made a lot of big throws. But if you really look at his body of work, he's not at that level yet. Lamar Jackson, for all the talk about how great of a passer he is not really a guy that's going to beat them through the air. He just isn't. And they're very good at keeping him in the pocket, and they're very good at taking away his ability to run. That's why they're able to do whatever they need to do when they beat the Ravens. But these teams that they play, and again, look at the teams in the playoffs. C.J. Stroud is pretty good at throwing the ball. Josh Allen, pretty good at throwing the ball. Patrick Mahomes, pretty good at throwing the ball. Justin Herbert. And here's the thing I'll say about the Chargers. When the Steelers played them, it was the second game. Justin Herbert was hurt. They were still kind of trying to figure out who they are and what they are and get organized and figure out some things in their offensive line and their defense. If you watch that team play, they're getting better and better every week. So that's not to say the Steelers couldn't beat them. But there again, that might be a game where Jim Harbaugh allows Justin Herbert to throw the ball a little bit more than they want to, because that team wants to try and play Stone Age football and run the ball and play defense. But my point is, there are some really good quarterbacks that the Steelers are going to have to face in the playoffs. And so they've got to figure out this. They've got to get this part of their game taken care of. And if they do that, I wouldn't worry too much about last night's game. Probably would not worry too much about last night's game. By the way, the game is always on at Archie's. Archie's on Carson Street. Get down to Archie's. Of course, they've got try that again. All right. They got 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. You can also always eat my grilled cheese sandwich. Sundays, starting at noon, they've got all of the NFL games on. They're open all weekend. Like I say, Saturday, if you're a Pitt fan, if you're a West Virginia fan especially, they usually have a big crowd, a contingent of those fans to watch those games for college football every day. And, of course, Penguin games are always on. So get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Generally on Mondays, I'll be at Archie's for Monday Night Football. If you want to stop in and say hello, we can always enjoy some good conversation and talk a little bit of sports. So tell them Paul Zeise sent you once you get there. But the big picture for the Steelers is they lost one game. That's the big picture for the Steelers. They lost one game. And I think that really, if they basically ever want to get to a point where they're going to take a step further, they're going to have to get better at coverage. And I would just tell you that's a big thing. If they're going to get better at coverage, it'll be something that I think gives them a chance to compete against all of these other quarterbacks that they might have to play. Now they've got 10 days to get ready, or whatever, days or so to get ready for the Bengals. If they get ready for the Bengals, now the Bengals, I think, have a bye this week. Actually, I know they have a bye. Nobody cares about these things, but I have Jamar Chase on my fantasy team. To play against the Steelers as well. And I think if you're really trying to assess the damage from last night, as long as it's just last night, then I don't think it's that big of a deal. As long as it's just last night. Now, if it goes before that, and And you know what? To the next couple of weeks, then maybe we have something to talk about. But I'll chalk it up to a bad day at the office, and that would go also for the coaches as well as the players. Here we go. Let's try this.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.